Good morning, my name is Massimo Leone. I'm a professor of semiotics at the University of Turin, Italy, in the Department of Philosophy and Educational Sciences, and a professor of semiotics part-time also at the Department of Chinese Language and Culture at the University of Shanghai, China. It is a pleasure and honor to accept the invitation that was offered to me by Professor Jenny Ponzo, also at the University of Turin, to take part in the advanced seminar that she and her team organize in the framework of her research project Nemo Sancti, which is an ERC starting grant, a project on the meaning of sanctity in the contemporary time. The seminar, as you know, is devoted to the theme of a persona, to debate about what a person is, what the definition and the concept of persona, person, might be in different cultures and temporal settings. As I was invited to contribute to this seminar, I thought that the best way to add my contribution to it would be to intersect this theme with the theme of my own ERC Consolidated Grant, a project called Facets, Face Aesthetics in E-Technological Societies, which is a research project that I lead and that involves numerous researchers working on the topic of the meaning of the face, especially in the digital time. So I have decided to propose today a short lecture on the role of the face in defining what a person is, the role of the face in personification. Personification meant also, according to the ancient rhetorical figure of prosopopeia, so the fact of attributing a prosopon, which in Greek means face, to make poeia the face of something or someone that normally is not attributed a face. The lecture that I will propose today stems from a general preoccupation of mine concerning the origin of the face as the most central interface of human societies, and stems also from the hypothesis that in order to deeply understand how the human face works, we should consider how this meaning originated and took a very deep-seated place in human anthropology in a relation and in contrast with the known face of other living beings, of those which we commonly name animals, and that I prefer to call non-human animals, in order not to forget the fact that we are animals too. So let's start with the first question. Do animals have a face? In late January 2020, media around the world insistently echoed the news that a mutant goat with an eerie-looking human face had been born in Rajasthan, India. The owner, Mr. Mukeshji Prajapap from Nemodia, had posted some footage of the bizarre creature, and the video had gone viral on YouTube and other social networks. According to unverified reports, villagers had first been terrified by the monster, then they had started worshipping it as an avatar of God. The story contains many typical ingredients of exotic narratives. Digital society and digital social networks have revived several genres of traditional face-to-face mass communication, such as gossip, conspiracy tales, hoaxes, and the ubiquitous fake news. They have also revived a genre that has its prototype in the Liber Monstrorum, a Latin text originally composed in the late 17th or early 18th century, which then gave rise to the whole tradition of the marvels of the East. You probably remember the wonderful study published in the circle of Warburg and Warburgian scholars by Wittkover, the art historian and theoretician, about the marvels of the East. As cultural and art historians have long underlined, these and similar texts must be interpreted as projections of the European collective imaginary towards the unknown, mysterious, and fabulous territories of the Orient. Such trend seems to gain new momentum in the epoch of digital legends, for instance in the story, countlessly repeated by the media, of the goat with a human face. The channel is new, that is, digital media, and some of the lexicon is inspired by modern science fiction, like the adjective mutant, yet the cultural function of this narrative remains that of projecting in a remote space a deep-seated anthropological worry. Do animals have a face? Second part of our inquiry, which will be an etymological inquiry. The answer to the question, indeed, depends on the definition of animals and on that of face. The animality of humans has been increasingly accepted by human cultures, at least from Darwin on, and it is evident to most that human animals do have a face. But what about non-human animals? Several, if not all, European languages include a specific word to designate, I quote from Merriam-Webster, the projecting jaws and nose of an animal, or, I quote from the Oxford English Dictionary, the projecting part of the face, including the nose and mouth of an animal such as a dog or a horse. End of quote. The existence itself and the semantic definition of such class of words seems to indicate that in the cultures that are verbally codified by these languages, the face of humans and the corresponding part of non-human animal bodies are conceived as endowed with different characteristics. The Italian word muso, for instance, muzzle in Italian, would derive, according to some etymologists, from the Gallo-Roman musa, which means snout, nose, which would then give rise to the Provençal mus, with the diminutive mursel of mursel, to the Old French muse, then turned into museau in modern French. The word would have correspondences also in the Breton musel or morsel, in the English muzzle, and in the Swiss mause. Derivatives would include the late 14th century English word muzzle, device put over an animal's mouth to stop it from biting, eating, or rooting, whence muzzle in modern English to be compared with museruola in Italian and muselière in French. Etymology is neglected in semiotics, even despised. As a semiotician, I admit that this discipline of mine, in order to be able to proclaim a pseudo-purism that is both sterile and cowardly, has often scorned knowledge which, on the contrary, would be very useful to it. As semiotics finally leaves synchronic ethnocentrism, in fact, one does not see how it could inquire into the history and anthropology of meaning without considering, among other things, etymology, namely the history of the meaning of words in cultures. It will not be, of course, the pre-modern etymology of Isidore Séville, but the comparative approach already practiced, by the way, by Dumézil or Benveniste, whose results, semiotics, often cites without knowing their methods. According to some etymologists, then, this whole family of words would derive from the Latin morsus, then turned into mursus, and subsequently into musus. If that is true, although the etymology of a word does not always coincide with its semantics, the words muso, muzzle, museau, etc. would relate to the idea of the part of the head of an animal that bites, or that is potentially biting, or ready to bite. This etymology would suggest, moreover, that is in relation to the domestic animal per excellence, that is the dog, that the animal face is conceived as a muzzle in opposition to the proper human face. It is as though, through languages and their word etymologies, cultures surmised that the animal face is different from the human animal face because the former is always potentially a source of aggressiveness. It is a face that is able to manifest violent intentions but not their opposite. According to an alternative etymology, however, muso, muzzle, etc. would rather be related to the ancient Frisian muth, Dutch mond, Anglo-Saxon muth, English mouth, Gothic munz, German mund, Swedish mun, and probably also ancient German mulla, modern German mau. In such case, the word would not be connected with the semantic fields of biting, and hence animal aggressiveness, but rather to the semantic field of mouth. The etymological path is different, but it seems to come down to a distinction underpinned by a similar rationale. The animal face, the muzzle, is a face that is entirely mouth, a face in which the mouth so stands out as to completely overshadow the presence of the other composing elements of the face, and in particular of the eyes, which are etymologically, phenomenologically, and culturally fundamental in the conception of the face in many Indo-European languages and cultures, of the face as visage, as something that contains two eyes and therefore a gaze, a face that sees and is seen. A muzzle, on the contrary, according to the second etymology, is a face that is not meant to express a gaze, but one that is all mouth, veracity, instinct, aggressiveness. The Basque word for kiss, musua, has uncertain origin, but could also indicate a conception of the kiss as related to that of a face that becomes all mouth in the animality of kiss. In Latin, the idea of muzzle would be conveyed by the word rostrum, indicating the bill or beak of a bird, the snout, muzzle, mouth of animals. Varro would use this word to designate the muzzle of goats and swine. Cicero and Ovid that of dogs. Ovid again that of wolves. Pliny that of stags. In other passages the muzzle of a dolphin, of tortoises, of bees, etc. The Latin word rostrum is interesting from several points of view. First, it seems to refer not only to the face of mammals, like muzzle and its equivalents in modern languages, but also to the front part of the head of other animals, including birds and insects. Modern European languages seem to differentiate more between muzzles and beaks. Second interesting element in the etymology of the word rostrum, muzzle in Latin, it translates into many metaphoric usages indicating the front part of inanimate objects, with analogous shape, such as the protruding part of a plow, hammer, lamp, and even nylon, but also the curved end of a ship's prow. The word then came to be used, at first the plural rostra, to denote that part of the forum in Rome which was decorated with the prows of captured galleys, with the rostra of captured galleys, and was used as a platform for public speakers. Hence the English word rostrum, in the sense of dais, speaking platform. Yet, already the Latins would use rostrum not only for animals and inanimate objects, but also for statues representing humans, as well as with derogatory connotations in Plautus, for instance, which could be sometimes generalized as to cover the entire semantic field of the face, although with emphasis on the physical appearance of it. The word rostrum, indeed, derives from the Roman verb rodo, know, plus the suffix trum, trum, from Proto-Indo-European reh1t, plus trom, referring to the activity of gnawing something, of eating something, eroding, biting something, to be compared to the English word rodent. Again then, one finds in this word the idea of a non-human animal face whose main activity is that of eroding, biting, that is, of using the mouth in order to aggressively attack, bite, erode the world. Ancient Greek, too, distinguishes between prosopon, the face, the countenance, usually referred to men or gods, but seldom also to dogs, horses, deer, fish, and even the moon, and rhynchos, the muzzle. The etymology of prosopon, the face, in ancient Greek, works in a similar way as that of the Greek word metopon, forehead, coming from protiopon, prosopon, protiopon, what is opposite to the eyes of the other, the sight of the other. The phenomenological idea behind the semantics of the word is therefore that the face is not simply a thing, but an object whose definition depends on the gaze of the other, on an intersubjective gaze. For the Greeks, the face is primarily something that others see, something that one sees in others, to be compared with the Latin word visus, whence the Italian word viso, but also to the German word Angesicht. The Greek prosopon structurally corresponds to the Tocharian A pratsak, to the Tocharian B pratsako. These are two languages which are very important for the reconstruction of the probable Indo-European language, but of course are not known to a non-specialist. So Tocharian A as the word pratsak for face, Tocharian B as the word pratsako for face, which both contain the suffix ak, ak, in Tocharian A, or ek in Tocharian B, meaning eye, but designating also the breast. It also corresponds to the Sanskrit pratika, face, appearance, from prati, which has the same meaning as proti in Greek, in face of, before something, and a zero-grade root H3KW. Rhynchos, the muzzle, in Greek, on the opposite, commonly designates the snout of a pig, snout, beak, its etymology being probably linked to the Armenian rhynchung, nostrils, which in turn would derive from the Indo-European esrung H or esring H. One might speculate about the presence of a linguistic anthropological pattern, according to which words designating the human animal face, the muzzle, are shaped in relation to a semantics of the eyes, sight, vision, sight, gaze. So, according to this hypothesis, I repeat, words designating the human face, the human animal face, would be shaped in relation to a semantics of the eyes, sight, vision, gaze, whereas words designating the non-human animal face, the muzzle, would be shaped in relation to a semantics of either the mouth, like muzzle and its cognates, or the nose, like runculus and its cognates. A further element of this dialectics is perhaps the fact that the words designating the muzzle, with reference to either the mouth or the nose, are frequently ideographic or onomatopoeic, linked with the natural and unintentional activity of breathing rather than to the cultural and intentional activity of looking. So it is as if there were this a very broad and cross-cultural, cross-linguistic anthropological pattern, according to which words that designate the animal face, the muzzle, are constructed in relation to the sounds that this part of the face can produce in animals themselves. The sounds of breathing, the sounds of eroding, the sounds of biting, whereas a non-onomatopoeic, mostly symbolical pattern is behind the words that in Indo-European languages designate the human face, as related not with this sound-producing part of the face, but to the eyes, this spiritual, intellectual, idealized part of the human face. So, a further element of this dialectics, I was saying, is the fact that the words designating the muzzle with reference to either the mouth or the nose are frequently ideographic or onomatopoeic, linked with the natural and unintentional activity of breathing rather than to the cultural and intentional activity of looking. So, for instance, the Armenian pinch, nostril, nose, the Middle Armenian pinchke, the Armenian dialects pinch, inch, binge, binge, pinch, psch, nose, nostril, snout, muzzle, the Georgian pinchvi, nostril, the Khotansaka, which is another important language in the reconstruction of the relation between Indo-European, Indo-Iranian and Asian languages, Pinja, breast, side, peak, but also in Caucasian languages, like in the Abaza Pincha, the Abkhaz Apincha, and the Ubik, which is, by the way, the language in-depth studied by Dumezil. You would remember Dumezil's researches about investigations about Ubik language. So all these languages contain an onomatopoeic structure, and they all refer to the nose as well as the muzzle, to the muzzle of animals, but also in Mingrel, Laz, PZ, face, and Kurdish, Finch, the same ideographic onomatopoeic root is to be found as well in Middle Iranian languages and New Iranian dialects, for instance, in Middle Persian, Pozak, snout, in Sogdian, in Khawar, as well as in Baluchi, Pashto, Poza, meaning nose, in Munji, and so on and so forth. Poze being, of course, the word that in modern Persian designates the nose, but also the snout. So rostrum, the Latin word which refers to the front, protruding part of the animal face, but derives from the Indo-European root from gnawing, eroding, appears like a synthesis of these two etymological and semantic paths. So let me summarize what we have been doing so far. We have analyzed the etymology and the structure of words designating the human face in several Indo-European languages, and we have compared them with each other, but also contrasted them with another series of words and their etymology, the words designating the animal face, the muzzle, the snout, in as many Indo-European languages. What we have found is that whereas Indo-European words for the human face mostly refer to the eyes, to the sight, to the gaze, to the upper part of the face, the anatomy of the face, most, if not all, Indo-European words designating the muzzle, the snout, etymologically refer to the lower part of the face, to the nose, to the mouth. So, on the one hand, you have words that contain the concept of a relation to the world, which is based on sight, which is based on vision, which is based on the fact that the other living being, the other thing, is observed, is beheld, but it's not held. And on the other hand, you have words in whose etymology is the idea that the other thing, the other living being, is not only beheld, is not only observed, it is also held, it is also devoured, it is also attacked with the mouth. We have also discovered that there is not only this dialectics between words designating the sight and words designating the bite, words designating a distant relation with the other, and words designating a close and even encompassing aggressive relation with the other, but also dialectics that is ingrained in the phonetics itself of these words. The words that refer to the snout, to the muzzle, in many cases are onomatopoeic or ideographic. They somehow mimetically evoke the idea of either breathing, so something that is done unintentionally, that is done by all mammals, by all animals that breathe, and also to the idea of eroding something with one's mouth. So one at this stage could claim that this is true for a very broad cultural area, which is the cultural area that we can call Indo-European, but also Indo-Iranian. But one could also formulate a hypothesis that this is not true for other cultures. This is not true for the entire humankind. And so that this hypothesis that somehow these dialectics between words for the face and words for the muzzle point at how the concept of the human face has been built in humanity should be culturally relativized. Well, personally I don't think so, and in order to prove that this might be actually universal, have dared widened this investigation outside of the Indo-European, Indo-Iranian world. So outside of this area, outside of the Indo-European, Indo-Iranian area, in China for instance, the Han character roughly translates the word face in English, the Han character mian. It is a character in a logogram, the logogram mian, which is at the center of an extremely complex semantic field, where it enters in a long and diversified series of compounds, including those that, referring to the social face, have fascinated Western scholars, at least from the early 20th century. You should probably know that the concept of face in Goffman, made famous by Goffman, elaborated by Goffman, the father of ethnomethodology, as its origin exactly in the curiosity of Western scholars coming into contact with this Chinese word, mian, at the beginning of the 20th century, and reflecting on how this word and this concept was different from the word and the concept of the face in English or in other Indo-European words. So, Chinese etymology has different rules than the etymology of Indo-European languages. So in order to understand how a Han character evolves, we have to look at historical forms of this character. So ways in which, to be very simple, to put it very simply, this character was drawn in ancient times. So historical forms of this character, the character mian, include the Shang period glyph that you see in the slide, which is found in the so-called oracle bond script. To me, it is difficult in this case too not to see a giant transversal eye in the first verbal graphic representation of the idea of face in Chinese history. So the first historical form of the Chinese character that transcribes the concept, the idea of mian, of the face, is actually a sort of an eye, single eye, which is drawn in a diagonal way. But if we proceed through history, the so-called small seal script 2, which you see also in the slide, seems to consist in the representation of the diagram of face where two eyes are clearly visible in the upper part. On the contrary, Chinese translates the English muzzle as bi ku bu fen, containing the Han character for nose, bi, which in turn derives from a previous character, zi, plus the phonetic character that you see in the slide. As regards the first zi, it was the original character used in Chinese to designate the nose. All historical forms of it show glyphs pictographically representing a nose through the diagram of a face from which the two eyes have been subtracted by simply leaving the diagram open in the upper part. So in the slide you can see the historical forms, the historical glyphs indicating, designating the word and concept of nose in ancient China, in oracle bone script, in bronze inscriptions, in choose lip and seal script, in ancient script, although in this case a crossing horizontal line seems to already hint at the presence of two eyes, and the small seal script, which has two forms. What I'm saying is that if you see the historical forms of the character for the nose in China, which then give rise to the traditional Han character for designating the nose, we'll talk later about the evolution of this character. If you look at these historical forms, you realize that actually they represent a face from which the two eyes have been eliminated. So in Chinese too, there is this contrast between the fact that the idea, the concept and the word of the face is represented through logograms that point at the presence of an eye, and the fact that on the contrary, logograms designating the nose, they represent a face from which two eyes have been subtracted. So in Chinese etymology there seems to be as well this contrast between the nose and the eyes, the fact that the nose is somehow representing a force in the conception of the face, which is opposed to the force and dimension of the eyes. So the traditional character for nose in Chinese, whose graphic history we have tried to reconstruct, passed from representing a concrete physical object, the part of the face known in English as nose, to designating oneself. You know, this is common. Everybody has realized and probably knows that in many East Asian cultures, in order to point at oneself, one points at one's nose, which is strange for Western observers, but makes sense in the history of Chinese culture, Chinese culture and language. The transition from this character meaning a concrete part of the anatomy of the human face, the nose, to meaning an abstract idea that is oneself, is variously explained by scholars. For some, it would depend on the Chinese and East Asian habit of designating oneself through indicating one's nose. It might also suggest that whereas in many languages and cultures the idea of one's face for the others and that of the other's face for oneself is designated with reference to the eyes and their semantic field and cognates, the idea of oneself for oneself is designated with reference not to sight but to breathing and to the facial part that allows it, the plexus of mouth and nose, as if there was a sort of a dialectics and a contrast between, on the one hand, conceiving the face for the others through the reference to the eyes, and conceiving one's face for oneself through the reference to the nose. It is very trivial, but we should keep in mind that we cannot ever see our own face. We can only see it through the gaze of other people or through reflecting surfaces like water, or in Western Europe from the 15th, 16th century on, Koran mirrors, bronze mirrors in the Greek or Roman epochs. So it makes sense that on the one hand we have a concept of the face for the other that refers to the sight, to the eyes, to the gaze, and on the other hand we have a concept of the face as origin of the self, centered not on the fact of being seen and see, but on the fact of breathing, on the fact of feeling air coming through one's nose and mouth. According to some Chinese etymologists, moreover, the new character that replaced Z, that is the traditional character for nose in ancient Chinese, that is the current Chinese character for nose, B, would be composed by the old character Z plus the character indicating two lungs. This composed character, however, originally meant arrowhead and probably referred to the topological shape of the nose in relation to the face. Later, its meaning turned into that of to give, perhaps with reference to the protruding, forward projected, salient topology of the nose. One should compare this meaning with the analogous meaning of the Proto-Sino-Tibetan word for to give, or the word for to give, to bestow in Tibetan or Burmese, as you see in the slide. Therefore, the hand character for muzzle, Biku Bufen, contains the character designating a face without eyes, that is the nose, conceived as the origin of breathing and hence self, plus the character Ko, which designates the mouth and has its origin in a pictogram representing the open mouth. You know, it's the pictogram, logogram that you find in every Chinese words indicating, for instance, exit or entrance, and the fact that there is a hole allowing a transit in a way. And then there is wufen, which is a suffix designating section, part, piece, and introducing hence in the lemma Beikou wufen, an idea of partiality. In Chinese too, as a consequence, the muzzle of animals is designated through a combination of characters that point at the semantic fields of the nose breathing and mouth eating, but excludes the semantic field of the eyes, sight, vision, gaze, that so prominently features in the etymology and semantics of mian, the face. So, usually when you talk to semioticians, especially young semioticians nowadays, and you suggest to them, oh, this might be universal, you know, this might be a universal rule of humanity. It might be that actually all human beings have conceived of their own face in opposition to the face of animals, and they have actually developed their idea of the face by denying the face of non-human animals. And we could actually find some relics of this process in languages themselves, in the words, for instance, that in many languages designate the human face, as opposed to the words that in many languages designate the animal non-face, the muzzle. So, if you nowadays propose this hypothesis of universal presence of a certain pattern to young semioticians, they usually say, oh yeah, but you know, this is not in line with, you know, the new anthropology, linguistic anthropology. You should read Descola, you should read Vivero de Castro, you should read Edward Kohn, you should read perspective anthropology and see that, for instance, in pre-Hispanic cultures, in Amazonian cultures, there wouldn't be this difference between animals and humans. I'm very interested in this kind of objection, but I'm irritated by the fact that it becomes a sort of a mantra, it becomes a stereotype, it becomes something that is put forward without any empirical elements in order to oppose a hypothesis about the presence of a universal pattern. So in order not to dismiss these possible objections, I've actually inquired into the languages that are usually the basis of many of the investigations carried on by perspectivist anthropology today. So I've tried to realize whether in Amazonian languages something similar happens as well or not. Because if we see that in Amazonian languages too there is this pattern, then we couldn't claim just by quoting Vivero de Castro or Descola that, you know, there are no universals, that we should have pay attention to different conceptions of nature and so on and so forth, different ontologies. So what happens in Tupi languages, for instance? Well, if you look at Tupi, which is one of the most important pre-Hispanic languages of Brazil, one of the most diffused Amazonian languages, we can clearly distinguish between, on the one hand, the word and concept of oba, which means face, and which is phonetically and perhaps even etymologically close to the word and concept of aba, which means man, person, individual, and on the other hand, the word and concept of ti, which, just like the Latin rostrum or the Greek rheunkos, designates the snout of non-human animals, the beak of birds, even the paw of boats. So, in these languages too, there is the need to differentiate, at least through words, between what a human face is called and what a non-human face is called, between an oba and a ti. The word ti also has the verbal meaning of to attach, and very interesting to me, the metaphorical meaning of to be ashamed of something. So in these Amazonian pre-Hispanic languages too, there is the idea that actually when a face, an oba, is ashamed, it becomes sort of a T. So a non-human face, an animal face. That Tupi culture, so just like the other cultures just mentioned, distinguishes between the face of the human animal and the face of non-human animals is also attested by the long series of compound Tupi words where the word T intervenes, several having been absorbed by the Portuguese. For instance, the word boi tiapua, indicating a variety of cobra, from the Tupi moya, cobra, plus T, muzzle, plus apua, upper lip. But we find the word T also in another word that is now part of the Portuguese lexicon, but has Tupi origins, namely the word maracatim, which is very interesting. What is a maracatim? Maracatim designates in a Tupi language the canoes used for war, at the pro-tim of which natives would attach the musical instrument known as maraca, which was made to sound during the assault. This is extraordinary because actually, exactly like ancient Romans, exactly like in Latin, where rostrum would designate both the face of the non-human animal and the prow of a boat, in Tupi language as well, with no possible contact with Latin language, T would designate at the same time the non-human face and the prow of the boat. There are other words that work like this. So of course we should continue this investigation through words and their etymology. We should continue also the investigations about other texts in other relics that circulate in cultures and their semispheres, in order to either verify or, on the contrary, falsify this hypothesis. But to me it makes sense that human beings have actually come up with the idea what a human face is, not abstractly, but through a structural opposition and a structural denial of that which is actually a face, that works exactly like a face, a human face, but it has been somehow recategorized as a non-human face, and therefore as a non-face, as a muzzle, that of other living beings, and especially of other mammals. So, of course, there is a huge philosophical question that is attached to this etymological and semiotic inquiry, and it is the philosophical question of what are the limits of the human face, what are the limits of the visage. In an article which will be published, I hope, in the collection of essays that will come up from this seminar, under the direction of Jenny Ponzo, I will expound on this. I will expound on the concept of visage in Levinas, on how Levinas forgot animals, non-human animals, in conceiving his ethical idea of the visage. I will talk about Deleuze and Guattari failed, to me, attempt to re-encompass non-human animals in the concept of visage, and I will talk also at the interesting, although not completely achieved, attempt by Jacques Derrida at deconstructing and reconstructing the idea of the visage in order to encompass also that of his own cat. So I thank you very much for your attention. Unfortunately, I cannot take questions because a being without a face, that is a virus, is at the moment obliging us not to see each other's faces directly, but I hope that you'll be able to respond either through our online conversation or to the paper that will come out from this seminar. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I thank in particular Jenny Ponzo and also her team for organizing this wonderful seminar. Thank you very much.